All right. And I'll help kind of monitor the chat and things as well. We had quite a few people register, but it is a summer evening, so I mean, you never know.
No problem.
All right.
I just like to add, as chair of the SIG, thank yous to Jenith and Teresa for their time and expertise with the webinar, and thank you to Wendy for organizing it and getting the invite sent out. And for any of your colleagues that do miss the webinar, it will be posted up on our website. That's why we're recording it, so that we can put it there. So I will get out of the way and let Jenith and Teresa take it away.
All right. Teresa and Jenith, do you guys mind kind of giving a little bit of background on yourself, and just hoping that this can be an open discussion within the group. We call this a journal club / clinical discussion, and I was really excited. Our last one was a great clinical discussion to take it from there.
Yeah.
I wanted.
Oh, go ahead, Teresa.
I was gonna say, I want to apologize. I'm not on video. I just left an event. I'm in my car. So can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not driving, sitting in an air-conditioned car.
Why don't you go ahead?
Dennis, can I give... What?
Go ahead.
Okay, so I am an occupational therapist. I get the luxury of working with Wendy, and I work at Ohio State University Medical Center. I've been there for a really long time, so I've kind of grown up in this industry and seen things evolve. I was lucky to be on the first position paper, and Carmen DeJovene and Tina and I and a few others would kind of do updates every year to kind of keep up on the evidence, to see what like the clinical practice guidelines said. And we know that it's hard, no one has time to update these. So when I saw Jenith at Vancouver ISS before the world stopped, she was brave and willing to lead us on this endeavor to update the application of ultra lightweight wheelchairs. So we have a whole committee that did it, and I just want to shout out that I'm really grateful for her leadership on this. She kept the group going. It took us longer than we would have liked because we all have full-time jobs. So that's my background, and Jenith, I'll pass it to you.
Awesome. Yes. Thank you, Teresa. I still remember where we were in Vancouver at that table in the Westin when I had this great idea to start this project. Who knew what the world had in store for us? But yeah, my background is I am a physical therapist, and I currently work for a wheelchair manufacturer, Permobile, but prior to that, I worked for 10 years at a spinal cord injury center here in Atlanta, Shepherd Center, and 7 years of that specialized in seating and mobility. And so I always, when people, I mean, within the ANPT and then within the AT seating and wheeled mobility SIG, I do feel like we have a home here, but it's wonderful to see all the efforts that this section is making and pulling in the rest of the APTA into our small little specialty area and getting this recognition, even just to have this discussion. So I appreciate that. And my current role is clinical affairs manager. I was a clinical educator working with Ginger prior to that. And so really getting to see all different aspects of our specialty area, or our industry, as you might hear some people say. The group that we wrote this paper, I guess you could say on behalf of, is RESNA, which is Rehab Engineering and Assistive Technology Society of North America. And we're based, most of the people that wrote the article are members, some are not, but some have contributed in different ways to publications within their journal. So that's a little bit about me. Happy to share any more, but we'll pause there for a second.
And I was wondering, Jenith, can we kind of give them kind of the structure of how we went about this? Would that be okay?
Yeah. So yeah, go ahead.
So, okay. When we originally had did the updates. We did it didn't have a lot of tools that exist now. And so we had like search engines. And if you guys remember, like through like the PubMed, we just had articles that would pour into a database, and we did a lot of manual searching with it. And we had a accumulation of articles that kept validating the preservation of upper limb functioning. So if you are not aware, the PVA has I don't know if it's called it's a clinical practice guideline. And so it's called the preservation of upper limb functioning following a spinal cord injury, but it's really relevant to any type of diagnosis that's a full-time manual wheelchair user. So we kind of took that and we defined our position paper, and we really focused on, looking that ultra lightweight manual chairs are the only acceptable options for people that rely on manual wheelchairs. We touched upon design and construction of them and the technology, and looking at like the evidence supporting the ultra lightweight chairs. We had a really hard time not keeping our focus, but there were so many directions that we could go, with it, as far as, the correlations to the ultra lightweight chair. And we decided that our definition, like our research question, was what's the current body of evidence for clinical application on the use of ultra lightweight manual wheelchair configuration, materials, propulsion, demands, and ergonomics. And we did a scoping review. We did not do a systematic review. So I know like in the academic world, there's, some people can do the systematic, but we chose to go for a scoping review because it was a less explicit problem, and we could include a lot of different study designs. And then it also allowed us to have some broad inclusion criteria. So it's a strategy that I've been able to use a few times that was more manageable than what we could address. And, after we did the research question, we started searching for the literature and had key terms as far as what we wanted to look at. And like we started with 1,000 articles, and then we started going through and including or excluding them based on our search terms. So we kicked out anything with a basic wheelchair, intro wheelchair. We did not include power assist, anything with power, anything sports. And then we made our articles be before anything, we kicked out anything before 2013. So we did 2013 forward.
Because the previous paper was completed in 2012. So that was why we did 2013.
Yeah. So we ended up like 100 studies, I think it was, and then we sorted them into the different groupings, which gave us the topics that we reviewed. I don't know if I'm going too much on a rabbit hole, but it really helped us focus. Go ahead.
No, you're doing good.
Yeah, so things that we reviewed in the literature were like muscle recruitment, kinematics, repetitive strain, equipment selection. We looked at alternate propulsion because we realized that some people might use an arm and a leg or two legs, or, it's not just two arms with it. We did dive into the rolling resistance, durability maintenance, talked about the physical environment, and we really wanted to look at a different populations, because early when we were doing it, like early in my career, we could never find anything on pediatrics. And it's been kind of fun watching that research develop and evolve. And really not only just get more on peds, but also like the aging population. And we didn't want to exclude anybody to have that idea of like preservation of upper limb functioning following spinal cord injury kind of channels you into a certain population. So that's all the background that what we did. And I'll stop talking to lead us up to the core tenets of the paper.
Yeah, and it was really nice having Teresa's guidance, and she was one of the original authors, and we had 3 original authors of the first position paper that joined us. And then if an original author couldn't join us. They recommended somebody. So it was really nice to have a combination of experienced people in the topic area, as well as experienced published authors. It was really nice too, Teresa being an OT, I'm a PT, we had engineers, we had someone who has their PhD and a PT, we had people representing the VA population. So, you know, talk about like crossing over different disciplines and working together on a single topic. I think that was something that was really unique as well. And one thing about the resume position paper, we use that scoping review as our guide, of course, but because it's a position paper and not just a singular, because it's not that systematic review, you will see certain statements or certain summary points that are combining all those aspects of evidence-based practice, where we can pull in you know, clinical expertise and clinical experience. So because there's such, if we only included like randomized controlled trials, we would have like 2 studies to talk about for wheelchairs. Right. So yeah, I don't know if you want to talk any more about that, Teresa.
Yeah, no, I mean, it is, it was a really nice process. And so I don't know, does anyone have any questions or concerns or clarifications about kind of the methodology, the process we went to gather the information?
This is Wendy.
No, thanks, Diane. Yeah.
And my thought was like, you had quite a few authors listed on there. Just how did you kind of divide and conquer between that large of a group? It's nice to have that big of a group, but it also can cause a lot of problems too.
Well, remember, Janet is our fearless leader. We actually divided it out. So like we took the articles and each of us had certain topics that we were reviewing, and then we could pull in others if it was too much. And then we would come back and kind of report back. So you're right, it kind of divided the work out, but sometimes it was like herding cats because of all of our schedules and time zones. And that's why it took long, because we would divide out the work, come back together, and then divide out the work and come back together. I would say that we all were very aligned philosophically. We didn't have a lot of disagreements. We had to check in on each other regarding the scope, because it could have been really wide. And I do, again, I'm bragging on Janet, but that was just a hard role. And I encourage anyone to do position papers, but you really have to have that one person that you know can hold you together.
Yeah, and it was a lot of learning. I mean, I think the hardest part was we really focused, or the part that really allowed us to work better is once we got, like if we have a concept map that you can see in the paper, and once we really got those main concepts that we wanted to focus on, then we kind of paired people up so that they could work together on a topic. And that was where we really kind of hit our stride, rather than 8 people trying to be on a call once a month together. It allowed people to kind of work in those smaller groups. And I think that really helped. We also provided each other with kind of like outlines of what we were going to be talking about and how we were going to pull in the articles. And so rather than having to read 2 pages every time, you could just look at kind of like, oh, okay, I know they're going to talk about tires, casters, camber, and tow, so that I don't have to necessarily read every single detail, but they've got the 4 main things that go into rolling resistance, and I can like trust that the information is going to come from the studies and kind of fill in those gaps. So I think getting those concept areas, pairing people up was kind of an advantage of having a larger group. But as Teresa said, disadvantage when we're trying to work a little bit all together. But we really had all different kinds of strengths, and it ended up really helping. It just probably took longer than if we were a smaller group.
Yeah.
And we had some people,
were there any?
Myself, that I've never written a paper, I've never published, I mean, like Teresa said, when I was in PT school, we were still just like, I swear we were using like card catalogs still. So I just went into this thinking I can just do a Google Scholar search and that's how I'll get all my articles. Yeah, no, that's not how it works. So I think that was part of the time too, learning process. But Teresa referred, and Carmen, Dr. DeGiovanni referred us with a student in the OTD program, and that I think helped us with a lot of the background and legwork too.
Yeah. Were there any surprises in the paper that you didn't expect, or were there anything that you were looking for that you didn't see?
If you've read it, or me, or the attendee.
No, just as far as to try to maybe generate some discussion. I think that our industry has really evolved in giving us a lot of really great products, and insurance forces us to really defend and prove that's what we want for our patients. So is this resource been helpful for you, or I'm just kind of curious how people, like, what their experience is?
And I had placed everyone on mute, so if you have a comment, please unmute yourself because we can't hear you right now.
I can certainly share. I was really excited to see the different propulsion styles mentioned. To me, you know, that was huge because there's so many more wheelchair users out there than just those who propel with bilateral upper extremities. And we have neglected what is best practice for those users, as well as, and not intentionally, I don't think. I think just simply because that's where the research has been. So to me, it's also a call for more research for, you know, wheelchair users who propel with a hemi technique, you know, one arm and one leg, or both legs, or just one arm. And then where does power assist fit in this? And, you know, I know, you know, some people look at power assist separately, and that's good too, just for power assist's sake, but it's really one big picture, you know, if that's part of someone's mobility solution. So I was really glad to see that you just mentioned in the paper, that for somebody, it might be the best solution to have not only the optimally configured ultra lightweight manual wheelchair and seating system, and a power assist device that meets their individual propulsion needs, because the technology has advanced just in the short time since this position paper and the previous one, right? Which is the whole point of updating it in the first place. But it was great to see the recognition of that in this paper. And that's why I love it so much. And wanted
Thank you.
wanted you guys to talk. Yes.
Well, it also made me think about kind of some of the secondary complications or conditions that occur when someone is just foot propelling, or, you know, looking at, like, you know, the impact of the hamstrings or the quads. And it really made me look at it from a wider lens. And it was nice to see evidence on things more than just, you know, a spinal cord patient pushing a chair. So.
Yeah. Yes, 100%. Lots of different diagnosis considerations, you know, why you're in a chair in the first place, and then what does that mean for your mobility solution, and what do we as the wheelchair seating experts need to put out there as, hey, this is best practice for people to be fully functional, or as optimally functional as they can be in the home as well as in the community and participation. So, and how can we measure that? How can we document that objectively? I think those are some of the call outs. You know, our healthcare system is so challenged by, or our clinicians and our clients are challenged by our healthcare system to really receive the optimal evaluation and recommendation of their devices, especially if they have you know, a stroke or something like that, and they get discharged in a rental chair, and then they never see anybody again to get something more definitive. So anyway, that's what I got excited about. And this is not my webinar, so I'm going to stop talking.
No, but Ginger, on
Thank
that
you.
point,
We appreciate that feedback.
I think there was that good case study too that said, you know, likely that this would have been a strong power candidate, but now that there's the opportunity for a power assist, this was more portable, it was more accessible to their home. So I think that the case studies helped kind of pull those things together.
Yeah, and the purpose of just mentioning power assist, even though that wasn't like our intention, it was just to say that like when you optimally configure, you consider componentry, you consider the size, you consider propulsion style, you consider configuration and measurement, then you're ready to maximize what power assist can do for somebody. Even though adding a motor to something that's poorly configured can work, you're not, you know, getting all of those in sync with each other. And so we didn't really want to go into the benefits, pros and cons of adding power assist or not. It was more like the setup, the bump set, and then the spike, right? Like you have to have all these things to then be able to really use technology in the way that it was designed. So we had some feedback during the open comment period that people wanted us to add more on power assist. And as Teresa said, we had to like hone down the topics just about manual chairs. So that is actually going to be a whole different scoping review that clinician task force is working on for power assist. So, you know, that was its own project in and of itself. The other thing I wanted to mention that Ginger, you said is one thing about funding here in the US, especially with Medicare, is that manual wheelchairs are just about the only seating and mobility solution that is not diagnosis based. Like a complex rehab technology power wheelchair, you have to have a progressive neurological dysfunction or some type of progressive disease. Manual wheelchairs focus on function. So no matter what the person looks like, no matter what their age is, no matter where they're going, you know, if this manual wheelchair improves their function, it doesn't matter what, if they have Charcot-Marie tooth or if they have if they have MS. So I think that's what's really unique and what we've really been able to retain about the way we talk about manual chairs is, you know, do some functional testing, look at ambulation compared to propulsion, and you might find that person's actually more independent, more efficient when they're propelling than when they're ambulating. I mean, not everybody, but leads to that.
I thought there were some good nuggets to use for documentation, but also just education of my clients that, you know, when you're trying to educate people on specific components, because people are always like, I want it the lightweight as possible. But when it's properly configured, it's easier to propel, even if it's heavier than a less optimally configured chair. And I think that proves the point too for that model of that follow up and follow along that we should be doing with our clients as well, because those needs definitely change. And so that optimally configured position should make the effort less. And regardless of physical fitness, body mass, or posture, I took some notes. But I thought that those were some really good things. And I also, just from ISS and also the article too, is like, you know, I'm so focused on getting that optimal configuration, but when we make those changes to the chair, we need to make sure that we're not causing toe in or toe out. And on that like grid of hierarchy for rolling resistance challenges, that's number 2. So I think just for me personally, that's something that I need to keep a closer eye on. And the position paper just helped bring that to my attention once more.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that, you know, as you start to learn how to work on manual chairs, you change the seat to floor height, you got to check the toe. And I mean, people don't really know that. And even just, you know, 1 to 2 degree in or out impacts that, like you said, that number 2 on rolling resistance. And we were fortunate enough, Joe Ott, who wrote that article and did his dissertation on rolling resistance, was one of our authors. So that was really nice and helpful, because because he helped us get through the engineering aspect of all of the technical side of the rolling resistance. And then we have the clinical side to make it into, to make it into, something that was clinically relevant. And I wonder for client education too, you get plenty of clients that they're like, why are you asking me all these questions? I don't care about casters. I don't care, like, just get me the chair. And I think one thing that the paper also helps with is like explaining that, yes, you might not care right now, but this is what we know will help you. Even if you're not thinking about the future, and that's fine, you don't have to, we're thinking about it for you,
I agree about the components, and I love the inclusion of the OT paper on the rolling resistance. And it's just such a good reminder before we go and put flat free tires on every chair, that, what was it? I forget the percentage, even partially inflated pneumatic tire has less rolling resistance than the flat freeze.
80%, yeah.
Oh my goodness.
That's what they would recommend is 80%, but the PIT article, like I have that chart that I use with my clients, and that one says 40% of inflation is actually less than a solid tire and way less than the foam filled insert. So those are things, guys, that are on the ANPT Seating World Mobility website. Is we have a lot of resources on there, and just challenge anyone, if you find things that you would like included, we're definitely all ears.
Yeah.
Does anyone else that's on the discussion have comments and maybe ways that they would use this position paper for education, documentation, or following along with clients?
I would encourage you to check out the wheelchair skills section. Lynn, who couldn't be here tonight, Dr. Worby, she's, after Dr. Kirby, probably number 2 in terms of teaching wheelchair skills and publishing on wheelchair skills. So that's something I think you can directly, even if you're not the one configuring chairs every day, that I'm sure you're teaching wheelchair skills. And so I would definitely point you to that section.
Matt made the comment that it gives weight to all education I provide my patients and something to reference when training new clinicians.
Oh, nice.
He's our buddy at OSU too.
Yeah, and one other thing that we did add, and there's very limited evidence for this, but is the use of back supports with, properly configured manual wheelchairs. I know, Wendy, you were kind of saying if we had any thoughts for the future, and I definitely think that in future papers we could see where we even continue to pull in posture and positioning as also part of this wheelchair configuration. There's just not a lot of evidence. We know, like in our heads, we know from experience what works, but I'd love to see more evidence. I know Jessica Peterson was working on a study, and I know there's like a multi-site study going on with Craig Kessler and RIC, but yeah, understanding the connection with posture and propulsion, I think I would like to see even continue further, because that worsens over time, right? So you have someone that discharges from the hospital every year that they're have muscular imbalance, their posture changes. And how often are you reassessing their propulsion and their configuration once they leave you, if you're not at OSU?
Doesn't always happen. I mean, it has to be the client who participates in that too, but I think MS is another great example of the impact of fatigue. You know, no two persons' pathways are ever the same. Ginger's been putting some links for different resources in the chat as well. The PVA CPG on preservation of upper limb function, of course, the article for today, and then also the wheelchair skills program of Dr. Kirby.
Awesome.
Good free stuff.
So Jenith, you targeted there of kind of like future needs, you know, when you're thinking a few years into the future, and if you guys are involved with the kind of the next revision of this, I question if a little bit more on maintenance will be included on there too, because I think that that's like a hot topic in research right now.
Yeah, I mean, maintenance and durability was tough because the durability tests that they have through RESNA and ANSI RESNA and ISO are not always representative of real world challenges and barriers. And so you might have a publication that says this chair is more durable, but then you see someone roll into clinic and you're like, that's not what the literature said. So I think with some of the repair registries that, and I'm not the best to speak upon that, Teresa, you might know more, but you know, with some of the repair registries that are going on where people are starting to document like what the failures are in the actual field, I think that's going to help us take the lab to the life a little bit more and understand what's priority for maintenance related to what fails the most. So that that's a good suggestion.
Yeah, and that was where we had a hard time figuring out how to hone in, and I was trying to remember some of that back end, and Jonathan's right. It was the inconsistencies of testing, because what's required and what is being tested, and then some of the, not demonstrations, but just the reporting. And I don't think we're there yet in the literature, but the whole wheelchair, the registry with maintenance, I mean, I think that we'll have much more solid evidence when we go and do this again, that it could be more succinct, but it just wasn't lining up for what we could include. So it was a good call out, Wendy. And then the environment, we also had a lot of debates about that. And I feel like, Dennis, we had to narrow that down as well, because we were starting to get too far outside of our scope.
Yeah, we tried to follow a little bit of ICF framework, and then when it got to environment, you know, we tried to just touch on physical environment. We couldn't really get to all the different, you know, social, economic, all the other different types of environmental considerations. You know, that gets into socioeconomics, and then you just get more and more challenges. So I think seeing more on participation would be good as well. I mean, that's where we really were able to pull in the older adult participation, especially from like Emma Smith, where they're really looking at how does it allow you to be present at meals with your, you know, in a skilled facility or in a long-term care facility. So I think I'd like to see more of that as well. We know the shoulder preservation, we know propulsion efficiency, but like, what is going to be meaningful to the individual? It's getting where you need to go and, you know, getting to the bathroom on time. So figuring out like what those outcome measures are to look at like health related quality of life and meaningful participation would be a wish as well.
That's great. Well, we are getting closer to our end point for our Zoom limit of 40 minutes. Any questions for Teresa or Jenna? I just have to say that when I read the paper, I'm just, it seems like a little overwhelming of how you divide and conquer that many articles and I put some marks at things that I want to go back and maybe reference back to that article that was really interesting, or something that I think I could include in my documentation. That's where I get a lot of benefit from these articles, patient education, and also just giving a little bit more meat to my defense of why a client would need that. So I really thank you guys for your time and for sharing your knowledge with us today.
Yeah, and we're working on the finishing touches to the AT journal, so it will be easier for citations in the future. So stand by for that.
Great.
Any idea when that's coming out?
Open on my desktop now to respond to the revisions. So hopefully soon. We're supposed to get it back to them by the end of the week. So it's already actually in like the journal template. So it looks really nice.
So
Yeah,
maybe
we just had to do like some very final, we don't have to add content. It was more truly fine tuning, like citations and stuff.
Okay.
So.
I was wondering, I'm like, what would you have to change to put it in the journal? So that's interesting.
Yeah, no, none of the content. There was just some of the references that we had to reconcile, and then I think keywords or something like that. We need to provide them.
Mm-hmm.
journal stuff.
Yeah. When it was out for open comment, was there much that you guys changed based on feedback?
Teresa?
Well, so here's my lesson, since I'll be the mom of the group. You know, we had a couple people that were very unprofessional and gave a lot of loaded opinions, which really caught us off guard. And I know for me, it like hurt my feelings because we put our heart and soul into it. So then when we actually were able to address it, that wasn't the intent. It was a person that was very passionate and not aware of how they came across. So I would say the majority of it was a lot of validating and a lot of clarification, but we had a few people that totally disagreed with, these few totally disagreed and basically wanted us to rewrite it. So it developed some thick skin, with doing that. But part of the open comment is to make sure we didn't miss anything and that we, didn't have our nose too close to the grindstone. It taught me like how I can be a contributor during open comments to others as far as to try to get reflection. But I would say overall, we maybe clarified or cleaned up some of our wording to emphasize, but no, Wendy, we didn't have to change much.
Good.
Does that sound okay, Jenna?
Yeah.
Good summary?
Perfect.
Yeah.
You had a lovely little smirk there, Jenna.
It was awesome. And it was a learning opportunity. If I'm ever given that opportunity, I now know how to approach it. So
yeah, no, learn from it. And we may get bumped off at any point in time. So just want to again say thank you. This was the most attendance we've had for the journal clinical discussion night. So Ginger and I are pretty pumped about that. So thanks guys for sharing your evening with us. And we're hoping to do this every 2-3 month interval. So keep your ear out for our next one. And thanks for attending.
Thanks, everybody.
thanks for
Thanks,
having us.
everyone.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.